Maybe I'm live? YouTube doesn't seem to think so, but maybe I am. Anyway, it's good morning from me. It's good morning from Steve. So, what's the panic about? Oh, the panic is just that every time before it still says 0 viewers. Anyway, sound is good. Okay, fantastic. It's just YouTube is having trouble catching up. First, I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to Aboriginal elders and peoples from other communities who may be taking part in this live stream today. So, thank you for coming along. Good night from Ireland. So we have plenty of people here this morning. Good to see you all here. Sion, Peter, Keen, Gerald, Matt, Frank, Dodgy. There are a few other names that have scrolled back. Michael, Guillermo. I've missed a bunch of people, I'm sure. Cyberstar, Mitchell. Hey, Mitchell. Good to see you here. So, I got a few different things to cover today. All disjointed. It's all just random stuff. So we're going to be chasing squirrels, but we have a herd of squirrels to chase. And the first thing is, okay, actually, let's get this out of the way. This is related to the subjects that I generally try to avoid on my live streams, because part of the thing of the live streams is just having a break from the reality that we're currently in. But anyway, this is a thing that I can't help but share. So there is my cousins, and there's a group of us cousins that get together occasionally on every 2 weeks or so on a video chat and, talk about how things are going, family sort of catch up type thing. And we had it last night. And so my cousin Jenny, who is, she's the super smart person in the family. She's a doctor. Anyway, she's been doing, she works with, the thing is, this is crossing into this whole COVID thing, but this is a funny story. So in her clinic, they've been doing COVID vaccinations, and during the week, so the normal process when you go in for a vaccination is you see the doctor, they talk about what's going to happen and get your consent, you sign the form, etc., and then the nurse gives you the actual vaccination. So during the week, this week, and this is one of those stories that if I just heard this, I would think, I don't believe this actually happened. But this happened to my cousin this week. So they had a patient who came in and went through the process, signed the consent form, was there for the injection. The nurse was going to give the injection, and the patient said, "No, you're not allowed to pull up my sleeve, and you've got to do the injection through the sleeve." And they had a bit of an argument, and then the nurse grabbed the sleeve and pulled it up, and there was a raw chicken breast taped on her arm under the sleeve of her shirt. So people are doing weird things. Anyway, very, very strange things going on in the world at the moment. And as I said, it's one of those stories that if I heard about that from someone else, I'd think, no, that's just someone's making it up. But no, that happened last week in my cousin's medical practice. Right. Now, yes, I know. You're 1 hour earlier than I expected, Mako said. What is going on with that? Maybe my... no, what is it? It is 10 a.m. I'm on time for me. Oh, maybe it's because of daylight savings changes? No, I don't know. There hasn't been a clock change for a little while. Now, yesterday I got a call from an old friend, Jeffrey Fernandez, who I used to work with at IVT many, many years ago. He was there right up until... he was there when we sold the company, and then he ended up working for the company that acquired IVT from me. And so a little while after that, he went off and did some networking training and he wanted to get some Cisco certification. So he ended up buying a bunch of miscellaneous Cisco gear, some routers, some switches, and that sort of thing, and did his training. And he's now had this Cisco gear sitting in a little rack in his house. Let's have a... Hang on, how am I going to do this? He sent me a photo. This is a little rack that he's got in his house. Anyway, he called me yesterday and said, do you know anybody that wants some Cisco gear to play around with? Maybe it'd be useful for someone that's doing some Cisco training or wants some certification or whatever. And this is what he currently has. And it's kind of in a free to good home situation. Now, he didn't want me to just give out his direct contact details. It might make things a bit too complicated. So I haven't even really thought through how we're going to do this. But basically, he's got some Cisco gear available and he doesn't need it anymore. He doesn't need any money for it. And so it's probably a situation where if you are in Melbourne, and it's pick up from Roval in Melbourne. So if you're here in Melbourne and you are after some Cisco gear to play around with, so he sent me the list. What is it? There's an access server 2509 and 8 cables. He's got two 1841 routers. And where is it? There's a 2801. There are 3 Ethernet switches. There's a what is it? He says it's a 2950 to 2950C. I don't know what that means. There's a 2960 and a 3550. He says, I can't guarantee they're in working order and cables or parts may be missing. But sometime a couple of years ago, he had them running and was using them for his Cisco training. Anyway, if this tickles your fancy, maybe get in touch. Okay, so Matt Smith. Matt is in the UK and says, I have some free to good home Cisco switches here in the UK too. 2960s gigabit switch, 3700 series stuff and other stuff. Let me know if anyone interested. We've just become the Cisco swap channel. If you are in the UK and yeah, you could use some of that stuff that Matt has, maybe speak up in the chat. All right. Yeah. Oh, Michael says there's a Telstra-owned Cisco router in the boot of my car. They haven't asked to be returned yet. Yeah, it's kind of weird how... I had this experience as well with IVT because we had our own mini data center sort of thing with a bunch of racks physically in our office for a while, and we had a few different internet connections and we had client servers on premises as well. So we had some situations where we had clients with dedicated boxes in our racks bringing in their own internet connections into the building. And it's kind of weird how... I suppose it is weird. I understand the logic behind it. But so often we would have a situation where there'd be a network provider who would bring in some gear. So they'd bring in the customer premises equipment and it would all get installed and it would have stickers on it saying, remains the property of blah, telco provider, whatever it is. And then eventually the service gets cancelled and you end up with this, the service gets decommissioned or moves, things change. And then you end up with this bit of equipment sitting in your rack and it says remains the property of blah. They don't want it back, or they don't care. It's not worth their while. What are they going to do with it? So you end up with this gear sitting there that you can't really dispose of because you don't own it. Yeah, it just takes up space. Anyway. All right. Just remove the sticker. Yes, mine now. like the cat from Red Dwarf. That's mine. That's mine. That's mine. Except for that bit over there. No, that's mine too. So, what do we got? Okay, a couple of Cisco routers up the top. What is it, 2500? Yeah, so access server at the top. A couple of routers, another router there. Looks like it's got some expansion slots in it. I don't know anything much about this stuff. So I will leave it to you to figure out what you want to do with it. Cisco swappers. All right, so if you're in the UK and you're interested in some free Cisco stuff that Matt Smith has, as he says, contact me through hazymat.co.uk. And if you are interested in this stuff, yeah, I have two 42U racks almost full of gear sitting in my garage, and the only thing turned on in those entire two racks is a Synology NAS sitting on a shelf right up near the top of one of them. The rest of it's just stacked full of rack servers, and I've got maybe 12 or 15 Ethernet switches and a whole lot of stuff. In fact, I've got a device in there which was back in the days of ISDN. Basically, I've got a what was the brand of it? I can't even remember. It was like this device cost $10,000 or some crazy amount. It was an ISDN router back when I was running server racks out of my house, and we got so it used to be the equivalent of a T1 line, except that it's not a T1 in Australia. It was an E1, so 2 megabit per second symmetrical connection. And I got one of these E1 routers, like a T1 router, but an E1 style. And yeah, I remember it cost $10,000 to buy it when it was new. And it is now, its value now basically is a metal case sitting on a shelf out in my garage. And who cares about a 2 megabit per second link now? Oh, all right. Yes. Okay. Yeah, metal price. We've paid the iron price. Now, I'm wondering, what am I talking about? So, I was talking about these. To wrap this up, if you're interested in these, then please get in touch and I will pass your information on to Jeffrey. I've got no idea how he's going to judge this, if it's going to be a case of no one wants it, or one person wants one thing and split it up, or one person just says give it all to me. I will pass on your details and you can discuss that with him. My suspicion is that the ideal thing would be someone that can use this in some way, like if you're doing some Cisco training and you want to experiment with stuff and just try setting up routes and all that sort of thing, then this would be a nice little kit that you could plonk it down, plug in power and start experimenting and configuring it. So that way he gets rid of it all in one go and doesn't have to mess around with dealing with lots of different people. So email me, might be best, John, Jon, at oxer.com.au, and I will put you in touch. Yeah, so far I've had references to Game of Thrones and Red Dwarf. Oh, Jeffrey's here. Awesome. All or nothing. Cool. So if you want it, so Jeffrey Fernandez, who is in the chat right there, is the person who has this gear. Fantastic. Now, what were we going to talk about today? I've got a few different things to talk about. There is the vacuum table. That's a fun little thing. So this is a project that Unexpected Maker, Sion, has been working on for a little while. And I'm just going to take a board off there. This is the current state of my experiments with Sion's design. The very quick recap on that for people who haven't seen it before is that it is a vacuum table for putting solder paste stencils down onto PCBs and having them sucked down so that they sit totally flat against the PCB. Because the problem is that if you don't get the PCB perfectly aligned and flat, like if you've got your stencil jig is not quite aligned, it's got a slight twist, and the thing is that I found that stencils are often just not flat. The frames often have a little bit of a twist in them. My stencil jig has a bit of a twist in it. Nothing's perfect. In fact, this PCBs have huge twists in them. This one is ridiculous. It's got a spiral in it, like a bit of licorice or something. So when you put the stencil down on top of the PCB and then you wipe the solder paste across it, if there is a bit of a gap or if they move relative to each other, then you get you can get a few things. You can get solder getting in under the stencil. You can get solder failing to separate from the stencil and it stays in the apertures. You can, all sorts of things can go wrong. So Sion's project is to make a vacuum table that sucks it down onto the PCB and holds it. So it has a couple of effects. One obviously is to get it to come down flat. Another effect is that it stops them moving relative to each other. It kind of binds them together so you can get it aligned, hit the vacuum, sucks it on, apply your solder paste, release the vacuum, lift the stencil off. Really, really cool idea. And there are some videos of Sion's about it, which you really should go and watch if you're interested in this sort of thing. So the general concept here is that there is a box with some supports inside it. You can't, I could open it up and show you, but basically inside here, this is an empty box, except that it's got posts, like a grid of posts under it. And those posts supply support for this top panel, which is printed separately and then screwed on. And there are pegs in the corners for location. And then the idea is that this is like a universal thing. You attach it to a vacuum cleaner and you use the same base for a whole different variety of projects. And then you can print out adapter plates for specific PCBs. And the adapter plate has holes in the corner that align with the pegs. You drop it on and that aligns it on the base. And the holes in that align with the holes in this so that vacuum can come through. And there is a, and as you can see, there is an inset in there where the PCB fits. Now, the only one I've actually printed so far, the one I've been experimenting with, is one for a client. It's a commercial project, and I can't show you the front of the PCB, which makes this rather tricky, but I'll just put it on upside down. So this is the back of the PCB. The idea is that it just drops into that hole, and then the position is held, and the thickness of the PCB is the same as the depth of the slot. So it ends up with a nice flush face all the way across it. And then when the stencil sits on top, it's got a flat surface, both the PCB and the surround, all nice and flat. And then the vacuum comes through the holes and it sucks the stencil down. And hopefully everything is good. All right. Oh, Mako just said, second use is reverse the air and play air hockey. That would be cool. Now, one of the things is you need to get a vacuum connection in from the side, and this will be sitting on the bottom of the stencil machine, and then the stencil comes across the top. So we have that thickness within which to get the vacuum. And so Sion has been experimenting with different couplings on here, and who else? There was someone else in here that was experimenting with different couplings. I'm not sure. I can't remember. Sorry. And the issue is that the thickness of the vacuum cleaner hose, depending on what sort of hose you've got. So this is the vacuum cleaner hose I'm going to experiment with. The thickness there is, yeah. The problem is getting that in there. So the way that Sion has done it is print another adapter piece which comes out the side, and then it allows the vacuum cleaner to be connected at a bit of a distance, which looks like a cool solution. But I was just looking around yesterday and I figured, and I had a bit of this hose. This is actually from my daughter's fish tank set up. She's got a whole lot of hoses and different bits and pieces. And I thought, well, what I could do is just bring in a couple of hoses in order to increase the cross-sectional area, and that allows it to come in flat. And because of the space, oops, which way? That way. Because of the room that we've got for the coupling on the end of the vacuum cleaner, what we can do is I could actually have 4. So I'm not even sure, I haven't tried any of this yet. I've just been printing and putting stuff together. So maybe now we'll plug in the vacuum cleaner and see how this works. So if I don't have enough cross-sectional area here with these 2 tubes, what I could do is make a different coupling that has 4 tubes coming off it, and then I could run 4 tubes going into here. And hopefully that would be enough that we can get airflow through and suck the stencil down onto it. Sherry said, if you make it have 2 other openings and have it as a Y from 3 into 1, you'll get an equal balance of air volume, negative pressure. As a Y from 3 into 1. Okay. Okay, so Sion has just put in a link, let's see, to Keen. Yeah, so Keen has done one. Oh, this is nice. Okay. Where are we? I've got to get this onto screen so you can see it. This is the link that Sion just dropped in. Oh, nice. Oh, this looks like a really nice stencil printer too. Look at this big slab of metal with all the alignment pins and stuff in it. What is that from? Is that it is a stencil printer? It looks like it. I was just wondering for a moment if it was something else that had been repurposed. So this is Keen's build of the same idea. And you can see there's the coupling coming in the side, and then these are 3D printed tubes with an angle going down to the vacuum cleaner. Oh, you can't quite see that, hang on. The area of the screen that's being captured doesn't quite match up. There we go. So the vacuum cleaner comes in there. That's a really industrial looking stencil machine. That's really nice. Yeah, so vacuum table on the top and these little alignment brackets that have been screwed in to hold it in position. Ah, Keen. Okay, so a commercial stencil printer from AliExpress. Yeah, cool. Right. So yeah, as you can see here, Keen has managed to keep the profile low enough that the tube can come out underneath the height of the stencil here. Nice work. That looks really, really good. So this whole project, like the line of thinking around this has opened up some ideas. I've seen a couple of different people working on variations of this now, and there is another variation with springs in it. I think it's got springs in it, so that the stencil is sucked down when the vacuum is on, and then when the vacuum is turned off, the stencil lifts itself up and separates from the solder paste automatically, which is really, really clever as well. Right. Yeah. So, where am I going with this? I don't know. Okay, so a couple of thoughts about this. I haven't even got this. I haven't even got as far as working with this yet. But since Sion got me thinking about all of this, like my mind has been buzzing with different ideas. And one of the things that I screwed up with this is that I walking away for a minute because I've got to show you a couple of things. Got to grab some things out of the... I've got to show you all my failed prints. I might as well get these out. I've gone through so much filament with messing around with this. All right. I think this was my first print. I can't remember. Yeah, this was something when I had problems with my printer. So this was the one that I started as the base initially, and you can see here the start of where all of the little pegs come up. And what happened? That's right, the first one, the temperature sensor cable broke on my Prusa, and it went into thermal runaway and shut itself down. So I had to fix the printer before I could start printing again. And then I started printing this one, And then we had a blackout. This would have been last week, whenever it was that we had that that little storm here in Melbourne, and we were without power, I think, for about 8 hours. And I had started the 3D print maybe 20 minutes before the blackout happened. It had just got through the first couple of layers. My printer is running on a UPS. So the 3D printer actually kept going, but the UPS battery started to droop, and so I ended up just aborting the print, and so that was another one to go in the bin. And then eventually I did the version that became the base of this, so I got a successful print out of that. But that was, how long did it take to print? I think it was like 14 hours or so. It was a long print. And then the top piece that goes over it, so got that printed eventually. Yeah, 3D printing is really cool. Lets you do amazing things. Oh look, if you look down through it, you can see the tops of the little posts. Some of the posts are overlapping with some of the holes a bit. You can just see where they are. Yeah, 3D printing allows you to do really cool things, but it's really slow. It takes ages. You just got to get into that sort of patient mode where you think, yeah, I'll start that running and I'll come back in a day and move on to the next bit. Like printing little pieces like this only takes 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes. I think this adapter took 20 minutes to print, so that's not so bad. But when you're doing large stuff, it can be hours and hours. And these adapters, the things that go onto the top here, I think this is about a 6-hour print. Yeah, it takes patience. But that's right, this is the thing, I was getting onto the thing I stuffed up. Now, part of this is that the PCB has to be held fairly securely within this space for this whole idea to work. And I might lose track of which is which. So I put in the dimensions and hit print, and that must be the second one, that's too big. This must be the first one. Yeah, I put in the dimensions of the PCB, hit print, and 6 hours or so later it was finished, and I grabbed the PCB and I went, it doesn't go in the slot. It's just a little bit too narrow here and a little bit too narrow here. It just needed a very small amount of easement around it for it to have been able to fit in, and that was 6 hours of printing and all of this filament wasted. And the other thing is the spacing, the size of the holes. You can see that the corner holes are slightly bigger than the other holes. That's because those corner holes are specifically designed to fit onto these location studs. So if I turn that around and push it down, it goes onto the stud. And the size of the holes on the first one, like that, if I just do one hole, it goes on nicely, it locates it well. But if I put all 4 of these on, if this is the first print, I can't remember. I should have written numbers on them. So it's kind of tight. It goes on and it locates it really well. It's not going to move. But then to get this off again, it makes me worry that I'm going to break it. I've got to sort of ease it up a little bit on the corners. Oh, this one's tight. And if I break the stud off on that grey piece, that's a real problem. So I have to, in order to change this adapter plate, I've got to very carefully ease the corners up in order to avoid, well, this one's tight, in order to avoid damaging that bottom plate. So what I wanted to do was make some adjustments to the size of these holes. I needed to expand them just very slightly to increase the clearance so that it would go on and not have slop, but also not be binding on these posts and then potentially damaging them if I pull them off. So this was the first one I printed, and it was undersized on the PCB and slightly undersized on the holes. And then I printed another one, and this one, the holes are very, I don't know if you can see it moving, just watch the edge up here. If I move that, see how the yellow is moving on the grey? And that's because I went very slightly too big on the holes for that iteration. And I also went very slightly too big on the PCB holder. So that was another 6 hours of printing to discover that. Now this is the thing is, if I hadn't been so gung-ho, I could have actually tuned this a whole lot better, because what I should have done is done 2 test pieces. What I could have done is printed a piece about that size that was just this corner and the hole. It would have printed in about 10 minutes, and I could have checked the fit on that little locating stud. And I should have printed a piece that it didn't have all these features in it. What I could have done is just done a rectangle, like a border, and with no holes in it, just a simple hollow square, basically, like make it, say, 3 or 5 millimeters border all the way around. Printed that. That would have probably printed in about 10 or 15 minutes. And then I could have checked the fit on the PCB and not spent 6 hours printing this to discover that I got that dimension wrong and these dimensions wrong. So that was totally my own fault. I should have, yeah, I was being a bit too gung-ho. Oh, and also the other thing is that I think I also adjusted the depth, because the thing is that a PCB is not actually exactly, like if you say 1.6 millimeter PCB, what is it? Well, this one's actually 1.57, 1.58. It's pretty close. But in any case, a nominal 1.6 millimeter PCB is not 1.6 millimeters. And the PCBs are made up of, it's a lamination of multiple things. So there's the fiberglass core or multiple cores if it's like a 4 or more layer board. And then you've got the layer of copper. And the thickness of the copper can vary as well, because you can get copper at like, what is it, 1 ounce? What's the measurement? 1 ounce per inch, square inch or something, versus 2 ounce. You can get, anyway, different thicknesses of copper. So you can specify heavier copper if you're doing a board that has specific thermal requirements. The thickness of the silk screen and the solder mask affect it. So when you say 1.6 millimeter PCB, the actual thickness will vary depending on the weight of the copper, how many layers, so therefore the composition of the stack up for the cores. So yeah, you can't just take it as that's a 1.6 millimeters. I'm actually surprised that that is measuring so close on, 1.59. Anyway, the point of all of this is, this slot is not quite deep enough on this iteration, which was iteration number 2. So I needed to change the dimensions, increase the depth slightly, and change the pegs. So number 2 goes in the bin. This is number 3, and this one's getting closer. I still need to adjust the corner hole, so you can see it's moving a little bit. The PCB is now a really good fit. That it drops in nicely, it doesn't bind, but it also doesn't move. In the yellow, I've added a little thing in the corner here so I can grab the PCB and pull it up. And also I increased the depth of the cut into here. So now that is like a really smooth transition. The thickness of the PCB and the way it's inset feels perfect now. That's really, really good. So with the stencil on there, we can drag the squeegee across it and should get a nice smooth surface to work on. Right. Now, I am kind of curious to give this a try now. So, all right, let's see if I can catch up on some chat. What have people been saying? Yeah, so screws would stick up. I just put actual screws in. Okay, so there's some chat about different ways to do this. Oh, some Call It Fun said, why are there holes outside the PCB inlay? Doesn't that cause vacuum to leak? So the reason for that is that we want it to suck the stencil down on the sides around the PCB. Now without that, this would have almost no effect, because what we're doing is it's going to be sucking the PCB down, which is part of the solution, but the main part of the solution is that the stencil, which is going to come out to this area here somewhere, is being sucked down onto this surface, and that's what makes it tight across the whole PCB. So we specifically want holes outside of the PCB area to suck down the stencil. Now, it's going to be kind of noisy, but I want to fire this up. I've been following Sion's work on this and wanting to try this for ages. Never actually got to the point of starting up the vacuum cleaner. So, I've got a vacuum cleaner here. I need to get myself some power. Where can I plug it in? Over the other side of the room. And I'm not going to do it with the real stencil for this board. I'm going to just grab some other stencil. What will I use? Gotta find one. Oh, here's a stencil for... This is a stencil for the RJ45 adapter. Alright. Right. Vacuum. This is going to get really loud in a minute. Alright. Vacuum on. So, little smiley face. Yeah, that's not a very good fit. I need to tune the fit on this as well. In fact, I am going to... What am I going to do? I'm going to put some tape around it, because it almost falls out. I just need to... I think I need to make this coupling a bit longer and reduce the diameter just slightly. Now, I hardly ever use red electrical tape, so I'm going to use that up. Probably not the most appropriate tape. You know what tape I should be using for this? Duct tape! And now I'm going to have people telling me it's duct tape, not duct tape. And then other people saying, no, it's duct tape. But for now, I'm going to misuse electrical tape as duct tape. There. I hope you're all happy. Now, noisiness. All right. Oh, this is a this vacuum has variable suction, so I'm going to start it on a low suction, and let's see if anything explodes when I turn it on. And released. That actually works. Alright, so I had to turn the vacuum up a little bit to get it to really start to grip. When I started with it really low, I could still slide this around reasonably easily. I think part of the issue as well is that what I've got here is a bit of an extreme case of a very large PCB and not much area around it for the vacuum table to grip the stencil. So in a more typical situation, you would have a smaller PCB and much more space around it, more gripping area, and it might work a bit better. But yeah, once I turned the vacuum up, it became reasonably difficult. Like, I'm bracing with my left hand, I'm bracing the base of it here, and then you can see that I can very easily slide the stencil around. With the vacuum going, that was really quite hard. It held it in position very well. So it should be possible to align the stencil with the PCB, hit the vacuum, and then have it just stay there. Which is cool! Sion, it works! I haven't actually done solder paste yet, obviously, but this is a very good sign. And it looks like maybe this little double tube thing does have enough, it does have enough airflow to make it work. Now, yeah, this tape is going to be annoying. I mean, once this is all set up, I think it would end up kind of semi-permanent, because this bottom part of it, minus the adapter plate for the project, this part of it will end up permanently attached, probably actually rotated that way. So vacuum coming out the back, going down the back of the stencil printer, and this would be taped down or adhered or something, maybe even double-sided tape, I don't know. So yeah, tape over the little tabs on the edge to locate it on the stencil printer bed, and then hose coming out the back and around. So just because of the way the space is aligned in my office, my stencil printer is kind of sideways. I have it so that the, can I show you? I wonder if I can get my my phone camera thing working. Let's try. I was using, how was I doing this before? I've had my phone, I think I was using Droid Cam. Let's see if Droid Cam is working through OBS. Camera. Do we? Don't we? Yes! Okay. Oh, that's super laggy and strange. Very strange. But my camera is running. Okay, so this is my... That's what I was just showing you on the bench. And if we come around here, look, there's you. And I'm trying to move slowly so that I don't make everybody seasick. So this is where my stencil printer is currently set up. I've got one of these really crappy ones that has these horrible adjustment things on it. These are useless. So what you're meant to do, stringy hot glue or something. What you're meant to do to adjust the position of the bed is like back off the screw on one side and then do up the screw on the other side to adjust it. And yeah, the whole thing is just terrible. And then left to right adjustment is on this. There is a thread that runs underneath to a big nut. And the thing is that in order for this to work, what it's doing is dragging the whole bed left and right against the face of these, which are trying to locate it. So this is a really crappy stencil thing. So I've got a frame stencil in here. So just because of the way this space is set up, I've got this sideways, and yeah, it gets in the way. It's got a counterweight on it there to hold it open, bashing into the edge of the laser cutter. And then I've got to get under here in order to get the boards in and out. So this is actually for that same board that I was just showing you. But this is the way I've had it set up now, and I'm going to put the vacuum bed on there, crank these up because it's going to raise the whole thing by quite a lot, and this stencil will end up elevated up here somewhere and go onto the vacuum bed. So what I'll do is have the vacuum hoses come off the back and around. I'll probably have the vacuum cleaner hose coming in this way somewhere, and then the coupling at the back there. And then I'll open it from here. Oh, Mick will make it. It's been driving me nuts. Oh, I've got some news on that. I'll get back to that. But the short version is, looks like I'm getting 2 pick and place machines in about a week and a bit, which will be super exciting. Real ones. I've had some real problems with the feeders on these. So these are 3D printed feeders. And they've got a couple of things. These particular designer feeders fail in a couple of ways. One is that the little push thing that advances the tape wears over time. So after you've fed a couple of thousand parts out of a tape, it's just got a piece of 3D printed plastic, which is what's engaging with the hole in the tape, and it's pushing it forward by 4 millimeters each time. And that the little hook wears because it hooks into the hole, pushes it forward, and then retracts. and no, the other way around. It retracts, hooks the hole and pushes it forward and then stops and holds it. But because it keeps sliding backwards and forwards over the tape, the plastic wears over time. So after you've gone through, I don't know, half a reel or a reel, the plastic wears out. And yeah, it's at the point where they're starting to fail regularly. It's really frustrating. And the other thing is that the tape peelers are pretty crappy. They've got these 3D printed gears. So there's a little spring-loaded, that's a spring-loaded gear on the inside. The cover tape comes down between those two gears, and when the motor runs, it pulls the tape down, which works okay most of the time. There's a little N20 gear motor on here. But one of the failures is if the tape sticks to the gear, it comes down, and then as the motor keeps turning, it actually coils it back up over, and once it wraps in underneath itself, then it just balls up on the gear. And sometimes I don't notice. So what happens is that the gear will end up, so the tape will just stop coming out the bottom, and you can see that there are all the little leads of the cover tape coming there, and I'll realize that there's no tape coming down. I think, what's going on? And find that it's all wrapped up inside here, which then starts to compress the spring, and if I don't notice in time, it can actually destroy the tape feeder. And I had 2 feeders seize up on me yesterday while I was trying to do assembly in exactly that way, which was really, really frustrating. So this machine has made, how many boards? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how I would estimate how many boards I've assembled on this pick and place machine. It's a lot. I just don't know. All right. So, sorry. I'm ignoring you all. Peter, why are you sending me money? What is that for? Oh, that's right. Okay, so before I get back to pick and place, I will talk about that. I wanted to talk a little bit more about this vacuum table. So, ideas. A couple of years ago, I had a couple of old PowerMac, what were they? PowerMac G5s. And one of those, I regret my decision moments. They went out for e-waste. But the thing that I did retain were the cover plates off the sides of the PowerMacs. And one of those I specifically kept. In fact, I'm going to switch back to, where is it? Droidcam? Droidcam. Okay, let's go back to the mobile view. You see part of the carriage on Mick Will Make It, this piece of aluminium here. And you can see the Apple logo on it. I specifically placed that. So that was machined out of the cover plate on the side of a PowerMac G5. And later when I rearranged the head, I had to re-drill the holes and move it because the vertical offset was wrong, which really sucks. So now I've got all these extra holes in it and it's not mounted in the same position. So yeah, I didn't want to waste the other cover plate by making up another one, but I thought it would be funny to have the Apple part of a Mac as the structure of my pick and place machine. So that is what I did with the with a bit of aluminium from one of those PowerMacs, and the other one is right here. Which leads us back to the vacuum table. Now, what I have in mind, this is going to be kind of awkward because I'm trying to hold the phone. So what I have in mind is the idea of making a vacuum table using this and using that to replace the top part of this structure. So this particular print at the moment, we've got the box which forms the bottom part and then the flat plate with the holes in it that goes over the top. So what I could do is chuck this in the CNC machine and basically just drill a matrix of holes all the way across it. Well, not the whole thing, it doesn't need to be this big, but drill a matrix of holes and then make a box structure that goes up underneath it to provide the vacuum chamber underneath. And then the vacuum connections could come in underneath here. So effectively this surface would become this, that part there. And then I would need some locator lugs. So what I could do is I could use, I'm going to switch to the overhead camera because I'm making myself seasick looking at the camera waving around. Oh, Dodgy said, is the Apple logo laser etched? I don't know. Not sure how they've done that. I can just barely feel it. It's like it has almost no thickness. It actually feels thicker than I think it's on the surface. It's not into the surface. So I think it might be something like UV overprinting. I think they've printed onto the aluminium. That's the impression I get anyway. But you can just barely feel it. It's like super thin paint. Yeah, so I would have this as a large workspace with the grid, and then I could put locator lugs on there. I haven't yet figured out quite how to do that. But what I would need is the equivalent of these corner locating lugs. And then the specific PCB adapter, so for whatever the project is, would go onto this. It would sit down on it and be located by those lugs. And yeah, so this aluminium, it seems very, very flat. I think that would be, this with a vacuum box under it, would make a really nice vacuum surface. Probably cut down a bit. Doesn't need to be as big as that. This whole thing is huge, and if you look at the size of it compared to this stencil, you don't have enough field of view there to even be able to see. But you can see that the stencil is significantly smaller than that piece of aluminium. So I think what I'd do is trim the aluminium down to a more manageable size. Keep the Apple logo in the center, of course, so trim it to like here and here, approximately what you've got in your field of view of the camera now, and build the box underneath it, which could be 3D printed in multiple parts and attached, or it could be made out of aluminium or something, I don't really know. But yeah, so the idea is to follow Sion's design as a general concept, but implement that part of it in aluminium instead of that 3D printed piece. So yeah, I could even do it. I could even do it with almost no modification to this design. Just unscrew this bit and attach the box underneath. So where's the... Let's pull this off. This was one minor change that I made to Sion's design, which was I have this just screwing straight into the plastic underneath instead of having nuts under it. So on Sion's version there are undercuts here, and then you run a bolt down through it and put a nut on underneath, so the nut goes in here. But all I did was remove the undercut, and then I just have the thread of the screw go straight into the plastic. So what I could do is I could use this as is, unmodified, drill 4 holes in this aluminium sheet and just put this underneath. Oh, I've got to get the angle. Yeah, put that under there. Screw it in from the top with a bunch of holes drilled in this, and that would be a really cool surface to use as the top of the vacuum table. Yeah, well, I've been hoarding that piece of aluminium for years. Yeah, Sion says, well, it's a lot of supports, only need half that number. Yeah, I was really unsure about that. So what Sion's talking about there is this. So this is a 6x6 grid, and Xeon's design is now very, very parameterized, which is cool. So you open it in Fusion 360, and it's got a whole lot of options. You can specify lots of things, including the grid. So you could say 3x3 or 5x2 or whatever. You basically specify the rows and columns, and it automatically figures out the position of all of the posts and locates them for you. And what I was concerned about was flex in this, but it seems that I've gone rather overboard. So I expanded this to make it almost as big as I could physically fit on a Prusa i3. And ideally, I'd actually like this to be significantly bigger. I've got another 3D printer which has a much bigger print bed on it, and once I've gone through all of this, so this is very iterative, but once I've gone through all of this, what I'll probably end up doing is printing another version of this that is much bigger, like as big as I can fit it on the large printer. But I was concerned about the suction from here causing the top to bow down. But yeah, as Xeon says, I think I've gone overboard. I made this a 6x6 grid with the settings that are as large as I could fit on the print bed for this. And I could have done this as like a 4x4 grid or something, and probably would have printed a whole lot faster. Now, the other thing is that part of the reason for this is that I was wanting the top not to bow in. But if I do a version of this with the aluminium sheet, that's not going to be a problem. This is never going to bow. That's very rigid. So what I could do in that case is the vacuum box that goes under it would not need all of these supports. The only reason for the supports would be to stop the bottom from being sucked in, and it would only need a few, because it doesn't really matter that much if the bottom deforms slightly. It's all about keeping the top plate perfectly straight. That's what needs to be supported. So, yeah, and the other thing is that if you don't have access to a 3D printer, but you do have access to something like a piece of aluminium and a drill, like even a hand drill or a drill press, you could reproduce this pretty well, because what you could do is, instead of using this 3D printed structure underneath, well, what am I saying? You still need 3D printing for things like the board adapters. But for the rest of it, what you could do is take a piece of aluminium, drill a bunch of holes in it, with a grid that aligns with whatever you're going to use as your board adapter, and then you could use a project box, like a big ABS plastic project box, the type that has a lid that screws on. All you would need to do is take the lid off, cut a hole in the side with a hole saw to put a vacuum tube in from your vacuum cleaner, and then you could put some silicone around it. Okay, imagine this was a project box and it didn't have all of these supports in it. It was just like a big plastic project box. Run a bead of silicone around the edge, smush it up underneath whatever plate you're going to use as your top piece, and then you've got your vacuum chamber, or like the volume underneath, and you've got the top plate. And then you need to figure out some way to mount this. So yeah, there are quite a few different ways to implement this. And I think this is a really cool project. So Xeon, thanks for letting me mess around with this. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll be able to do something. I'll be able to help a little bit, provide some useful feedback or whatever. Okay. Smaller distance between them for what the size he has there is overkill. Okay. Would it be better if the vacuum was baffled somewhat? Don't want any flex on the cover. Yep. Sorry, I'm just catching up a little bit on chat messages here. Dodgy says that would be a fairly costly piece of LE if you machined it on the CNC. Yes. All right. It would be, but just to me, it is this particular piece of metal is just a very nicely, it's a very flat, very nice piece of aluminium that has, what's the best way to put it? I was going to say sentimental value, but it's not really quite sentimental value. It's like interest value. The fact that this used to be part of a PowerMac G5, which was a kind of distinctive machine and very well known. So, yeah. Keepsake. Gerald, yes, thanks. That's a good way of putting it. It's a keepsake. So I've seen people do things like take old Macs and turn them into coffee tables, and people do it with all sorts of things like engines from cars and lots of stuff, wheels, and so that's kind of why I did it on Mickle Make It. I like the idea that there is a piece of a Mac which I am using to build circuit boards. Right. Now, what have I missed? What have you been talking about? Keeping the Apple logo in the middle is known as the Johnny Ive rule. Yeah. Yes. Repurposing. Where are we at? I think we're at need a drink time. I came into this just a little bit bleary-eyed today. So this weekend, I've been hesitating to say this because there is the whole issue with doxing, and I don't want to do... All right, I'm just going to say it. This weekend is my daughter's 21st birthday, and I've been kind of hesitating saying that because of the whole thing of once that information is out there, then there is potential for use of that information for identity theft and all of that sort of thing. But it's not exactly secret. I mean, it's not in these days of Facebook and everything else. When there are major life events, people know about it. It's all out there in public. So yeah, if knowledge of someone's birthday is enough to take over their life, then the systems that our society is built on are more broken than they need to be. Yeah, so anyway, the point is, it's her 21st birthday this weekend. And because of... Iggy, your birthday as well. Happy birthday. And because of COVID restrictions, it means that we can't, have what would be considered a normal 21st birthday with, a big event with lots of people and that sort of thing. So what we've done is we've got a series of small events. So we had a Friday night family dinner for Anne's side of the family, and then yesterday afternoon, Amelia had some friends come over, and they've stayed over. So we've got a house full of people that have stayed over. And then tonight we've got another family event for another part of the family. So Mako said, so the lockdown has been reinstated? No, it's the rule. We're in the process of backing out of it. So up until recently, we wouldn't have been able to have people in the house at all. But we're at the stage now where you can have up to a certain number of people in the house. I think you can have 10 visitors, and there are restrictions around it basically. So it means that you can have like a group of people over, but you have to. You can't have, I think it's 10 people in the house and some larger number, like you could have 30 if everybody was outside. Anyway, something like that. So what we're doing is being cautious about it, and in a couple more weeks the restrictions will be eased off more. We're at the point now where we're stepping back down in the restriction level. So where we are right now is we can have some people over, but it's not yet a free-for-all. That'll come eventually. All right, now, On to important stuff. And Iggy, who just doxed himself by saying that it's his birthday. Okay, so it looks like I am going to be making a trip to Canberra really, really soon. And so I need to make some arrangements with Iggy. And we shouldn't be doing this too much in public. But anyway. So Iggy did an introduction for me to someone who has some pick and place machines that he had available potentially. And we've now come to an arrangement. So this is where it stands. I'm going to be buying 2 KO A4 pick and place machines. So A4 means that they have 4 heads, and one of them is still factory original. In fact, I think it is still in its factory original wrapping. Like, it's never actually been unpacked. And the other one has been in use for about a year, give or take. And a whole bunch of feeders that go with them. So I need to grab myself a tandem trailer and take a drive to Canberra and pick up a couple of pallets on the trailer and load a whole bunch of feeders in the back of the car and bring it all back down to Melbourne. And then I'm going to have myself a major project setting up a little pick and place assembly line. So, yeah. So next week, so everybody else ignore us. Iggy and I are just going to have a little private chat for a moment. So what I'm thinking of doing is going to Canberra and driving up Sunday next weekend and probably pick up the machines on that Monday. So a week from tomorrow, and then drive them back to Melbourne. So I've got family in Canberra as well. My aunt lives there, my sister lives there, so I can stay overnight and then pick up the machines and then drive them back to Melbourne. Yeah. You can get pallets for free from Bunnings. I leave them out the back. Yeah, where will it all go? That is the big question, Gerald. I will get back to that. So, Iggy, if it can be arranged, it would be awesome to meet up with you while I'm in Canberra. So let's have that conversation in a less public place. Yeah, so part of the delay on this has been waiting for the border rules to change, and they have just changed. So as of now, I could get in my car and drive to Canberra. Last week, I couldn't. What day was it? I'm not sure. Anyway, sometime in the last week, the rules have changed. So what I have to drive from Victoria through New South Wales into the ACT and then back again. And the borders between them are now opened to the extent that because I am double vaccinated, I'm in an area that is considered to be a hotspot, as is most of Victoria at this point. So I'm in the Shire of Maroondah, which is classified as a COVID hotspot, which means that I have to get an exemption in order to travel to the ACT. But the exemptions are easily available. It's just, fill in a form, click a button, and here's your exemption. Because I've been double vaccinated and I've got the certificate and all of that sort of thing, and yeah, all I do is get the exemption, and then I can show that if I need to as I'm traveling. So yeah, I'm at the point now where it is time to go and get a couple of pick and place machines. So, 11, Friday, what? Sorry, I'm going to, towing without necessary, interesting. Jack's Tech said, careful towing across the border. We got fined last time we did it for towing without the necessary license. I have never heard of towing without the necessary license. Oh yeah, Maria said borders in Australia. Yeah, state borders, basically. Because the way the lockdowns have worked here, it's been on a state-by-state basis. There have been it's the state governments that impose the restrictions on who is allowed to travel. And so the state borders are the points that have been, like the demarcation points, where everything has been locked down. Trailer Rego differs new to Vic. Jack's Tech, thanks for pointing that out. I'm going to have to check that. And Maria says, you have checkpoints. Yes. When the borders were closed, well, okay. I don't want to get into this too much because it is a subject that I've generally been trying to avoid because it gets people upset. And yeah, we've had some major fights in the family about this. At certain points, there have been checkpoints at the borders, like certain periods of time. There have in the main highways that go between the different states, there have been police working there where they basically just block the road, check every car that goes through. If you don't have the necessary authorization to travel over the border, you get turned back. So yes, there have been literal hard checkpoints at the borders for at least some of the lockdown period. And at other times, there have been things like spot checks. So if I was driving around in New South Wales on a Victorian number plate, the New South Wales police would probably go, ooh, that car there, let's pull him over and see what he's up to. So yeah, there's been all of that sort of thing as well. Okay. Peter says, you're not allowed to call yourself a trailer driver in Victoria unless you've been to a university. Fact. Yeah. Yes. So, I'm trying to think of how to extricate myself from that subject. And I think the answer is act like I'd never talked about it and move on. Yeah, so, trip. Now, there was a question. Who was it? Jack's Tech? Someone asked, where am I going to... Julius? Someone asked, where am I going to put all of this stuff? Gerald. Yes, Gerald asked, where will it all go? This is the question. Because my garage is jammed full. And to set up a proper pick and place thing, I want to do this properly. So I've been looking at some options. It is kind of at the point where I am going to need commercial space. And I've been putting this off for years because it's an expense, but it's going to become necessary. Okay, there are huge advantages to working from home. There are also really big disadvantages. Back in the early days of IVT, so Internet Vision Technologies, which was my software company way back that I started. So it was a business that I started in 1994. That's how old it is. When I started it, it was my mum was living in England at the time, and I was living in her house. So same house that she's in now. She's got a huge house up on Mount Dandenong. And so I started the business out of her house that I was occupying, and a couple of the bedrooms basically just got turned into offices. There was like a workshop area that comes off the garage that we turned into like a mini data center. We put racks in there. And for the first few years of the business, we were working entirely out of that house. So I think we got up to, I think it was at 5 employees, maybe 6, and we were still working out of the house. So we had people working out of spare bedrooms. And yeah, I get kind of obsessive. So when I'm working on things, I just don't stop. And it got to the point where we were a little bit jammed in, but also we needed to change some of the psychology around the workplace and not have it as people coming to my house and working. It was getting to the point where that was not such a good idea anymore. And we ended up renting, it was a shop front actually, down in Croydon in Dorset Road. There was I couldn't really find office space. What we needed was just office space. And out in this area, like around Bayswater, Croydon, this part of Melbourne, it's largely industrial. So lots of factories and warehouses. It's a sort of place where you do more mechanical and fabrication sort of stuff. It's not like high-rise office buildings and that sort of thing. And there are lots of things like accountants working out of first floor offices above shops and that sort of thing, but not so much just office space. So we ended up renting a shop front in like a retail shopping strip and then blanked off the front of it. So we had shops with us in the middle as a software company, which is kind of weird, out of place. But it was somewhere that we could set up, and rent was reasonable. And that change, it was really, really dramatic. The difference between getting out of bed and eating breakfast while you're sitting at your computer and then working until dinner and having dinner and then going back and sitting at your computer again until 2 in the morning and then doing it all over again, and just never being more than 30 meters, I suppose, away from the one point. The difference between that and getting up, going to work, doing work and coming home again, it's a totally different environment. And so that really ties into this whole work from home thing that we're going through at the moment. There are huge advantages to work from home. There are also big advantages to having a place that you can go and work that is outside of your home environment. And for me, it was very positive. Now, I tend to work in a very solo sort of way. It's really just me here in this and interacting with people online, phone calls, video calls, that sort of thing. So for years now, even before COVID and everybody started doing this whole work from home thing, I've been working from home, and it's been working for me really, really well. It does have really big advantages, but it has disadvantages. Like everything, it's all a trade-off. There are ups and downs. So it's at the point where, to do this properly, if I'm going to set up a production facility and put in some machines, I need to get past the point of shuffling everything around and trying to find space to put things and having stuff jammed in, like you can see behind me. No room to put anything that I need. You can see the storage on the shelves here. There's stuff sitting on the floor. There shouldn't be anything sitting on the floor. Look, just there. There's the light tent where I take photos of products and things. There is stuff inside the light tent because I didn't have anywhere else to put it. I just put it down in the light tent because it was a convenient place. And that's kind of what happens in you can't really see a whole lot else behind me, but that's kind of what happens because I am jammed into this little spot. Every square centimeter matters. And to do this properly, if I'm going to set up a couple of pick and place machines and ultimately I'm going to need a proper reflow oven. Reflow ovens are huge. I'm using the T962C drawer reflow oven at the moment, and I'm probably going to need to get a conveyor oven at some point, and they can be a couple of meters long. Then, you lay out some of this equipment, it takes up space. Then we need room for things like ultrasonic cleaning. So through that door there, the little bathroom that I got in the back, there's an ultrasonic cleaner out there. So the boards go into the ultrasonic cleaner, then they get washed, then they go into an oven to dry out. And the oven is in the garage, right up the far end of the garage on a shelf because there's nowhere else to put it. It's all just totally inefficient at the moment. Stuff is everywhere. It's wherever it will fit. Yeah, Keen says, you don't want to see my factory. Very little empty floor space. Yeah, so this is the thing. The big debate is it better to spend a bunch of money every year on rent for a commercial premises versus doing something like moving to a house with an enormous shed and spending that same amount of money on offsetting a mortgage? I don't know. This is the backwards and forwards things that I just keep thinking about. So where I am at the moment, so I'm in the Croydon area, which is Melbourne, outer east, heading towards the Dandenongs. It's sort of on that transition area where this is definitely the suburbs. I'm on, the block I'm on at the moment is 1,000 square meters. So it's moderately large as like a suburban block goes. But if I went 20 minutes or half an hour's drive further out, we could, for equivalent amount of money, we could get a house that would be on, on space that's measured in hectares instead of measured in square meters, and then put up a shed, like a 120 square meter shed or something, and have all the space that I need, and then spend the money on that. But then that has downsides as well. So I'd end up even more isolated than I am at the moment. It would be difficult if I wanted other people to come along and help me because the location wouldn't be as good. I'd need to make sure that, like running as Sion has pointed out in the past, one of the big issues with running a pick and place machine is the need for air, compressed air, and air compressors are noisy unless you go for like a screw type compressor and then $10,000 or $12,000 on an air compressor. So that's out of my budget. All right. Shed. Maria says, Brain had already made the decision, now it's making sure it has the right description of why. Sion says shed. A shed is not a substitute for a large clean space for PCB assembly. Yes, so this is important. Okay, if I'm going to do this, no matter where I do it, I want to make sure the environment is good. And by environment, I mean the physical space in which I set this up. I could do a whole lot more Tetris and get some space in my garage and set up one of the pick and place machines in there. Like, not do it as a proper, like a linear production line sort of thing, but find a couple of square meters of floor space, plonk a machine down, connect it up and run it. Boards in one end, boards out the other end. And it would be just perpetuating my current arrangement, but my garage is not perfectly clean. It's got a garage door that opens and closes, there are little gaps around it, there's air that comes in, there's dust on stuff. It's not great. If I'm going to do this, I would ideally like to set up a positive pressure room and do this properly. So if I end up renting some space, like a small bit of factory space or something, what I would want to do is partition it, like build walls, build a room that encloses all of this stuff, and pressurize it. So have air intake that comes in through filters, probably run a HEPA filter inside the room, and yeah, do it properly so that the room is perfectly clean. Sticky pad on the door so that when you walk in. I've been in enough factories to see the ones that are good and the ones that are bad. I've actually been into quite a few many different factories in China. So I've been in, the worst one I've been in was way on the outskirts of Beijing, and it was kind of like an enormous garage. They had, it wasn't bad. It was better than my garage. They had some reasonable gear, like they had an X-ray machine for doing BGA inspections and those sorts of things. They had, I'm trying to think back, this is quite a few years ago now. They had a couple of pick and place machines. They had maybe 10 or 12 people working in it. But it was, in fact, I've got a photo of myself in that factory. I was rather bigger then than I am now, and they couldn't find a dust coat that would fit me. So there's this photo of me wearing this yellow dust coat that is ludicrously too small, and like it just comes over my shoulders and my arms are sticking out the end. sticking out of the sleeves. And yeah, I've lost a bit of weight since then. Where was I going with this? That's right. So I think this is probably the crudest PCBA that I've been in, was this particular place outside Beijing. And they still weren't bad. Like it was still better than the environment that I would have if I set it up in my garage. But it really was just like a factory space that had been set up. And at the other end of the scale, I think the best one that I've ever been in was, sorry, what was the name of that factory? It was the one that was working towards the lights out. I've gone blank on it. Last time I was in China, I did a really long Twitter thread about this particular factory. The name will come back to me. It's one of the really big, like top tier Chinese assemblers that does lots of their defense contract work. So they have factories that no one ever gets to see inside because it's super top secret. But on the innovation tour a couple of years ago that Vela Georgiev ran, we got to go inside one of their like second level factories that outsiders can actually get into, and it was mind-blowing. It was so nice in there. But the point of all of this is that the environment, there were many things that were mind-blowing about it. The way they did their part tracking and all of that sort of thing. The whole process from beginning to end of how they could, like, you could get a board that they've assembled and they had laser etched QR codes on them. So you could take a board that they assembled a couple of years ago, they could scan the QR code on it, and they could tell you every single part on the board, what reel that part came out of, and trace back to the original lab tests that certified the parts that were on that reel. So for every single part on every single PCB that they assembled, like their level of accountability and the record keeping, with the automated record keeping within the assembly process was just insane. But the point of this is the environment was also really nice. So it was, you see this a lot in PCB assembly places, the whole airlock arrangement. So you put the covers over your shoes, and you've got to put on a hairnet and take off all your jewelry and stuff and put on the anti-static coat, go into the little decontamination room. So they close the doors, you're in a little airlock, and you hold your arms out and they blow compressed air all over you, and it gets sucked out through the floor so that there is no dust left on your body. And then the inner door opens and you walk into the positive pressure area, which is the actual assembly room. And then that's where all the machines are. So the idea is that once you're actually inside the room, because it is positive pressure, if there are any air leaks, what it will do is carry dust out. Dust will never go into the room. So when you open the doors on the airlock, all the air comes out. And this particular factory, I don't know why, but I have this mental blank on their name. And it's not like it's an unknown company. It's a really big name in electronics manufacturing. Someone's probably shouting at me in the in the comments. So yeah, very nice environment. I wouldn't be thinking of going that far. So not necessarily as far as airlocks and all of that sort of thing. That's when you get into like the medical grade and military contracting sort of stuff, when you need everything to be perfect and high yields and no particular problems. But no, it wasn't Foxconn, thanks Toby. Yeah, so some call it fun, says medical clinic use positive pressure over the staff to keep the workers safe from sick patients in the waiting room. Oh, Iggy, hope you didn't miss anything because you were on the phone. Okay, hang on, just let me rewind and I'll give you a recap. No, not really. So that particular factory, I'm going to see if I can find this. I'm going to see if I can type and talk at the same time. I can't do two things at the same time. No, I'm typing and not talking. It was. I think I'll be able to find it. It's. If I know that they are. This particular company is really well known for communications gear. They make lots of handhelds. It's not Baofeng. There's another one that does. Hytera here. Here. Is it H? Hytera. And hold transceiver. I think I'm closing in on the name. It was something with H. It started with an H. No, it wasn't Huawei. Oh well. Stephen W says, I assume I have missed the Cisco gear. No, you haven't. So the recap on that for those who have joined last, because I talked about this right at the start, is that a friend of mine has a bunch of Cisco gear that he wants to get rid of because he used it for doing some Cisco training, and it's a case of free to good home if you can pick it up in Melbourne. And so if you're interested, what I'm going to do is pass through the contact details of anyone that's interested, and you can figure it out with him. And so email me, which is John, Jon, at oxer.com.au. And Hytera, that was it, Hytera. Hytera was the name of the company, Hytera Factory. Let's see, let's just have a look at Hytera. So Hytera currently has, so in 2018, they apparently had 7,000 staff. Yeah, they do. Hytera specialize in radio transceivers and radio systems. And, okay. Here is, check this out. I'm going to, this might play some audio. Let's see. No, I've got my audio turned off. Cool. Now, this is from the, I'm going to drop a video in the chat. This is a video that was made by Carl von Moller, and this is the tour. So this video that I just dropped in the chat is the tour that I'm talking about. So it was a bunch of us who went on this tour, and it actually took a really long time for this video to come out. So Carl went in with a camera and recorded us and the factory while we were doing this tour. But the thing is that Hytera are very secretive and wanted to be very controlling over what was shown. So what happened was he filmed, we went in, we did the tour of the factory, he filmed it all, and then as we left the factory, he handed over his memory card to the Hytera representative, and they then went through his footage and said, okay, you can have this, this, and this, and then gave him the footage that he was allowed to use that showed just the bits they wanted to be shown. So so the footage that was filmed, he actually filmed it, but he was then only given the parts of it that he was allowed to use, and then edited it to do this this little video. So this is a few, and it took a while after we'd been through the factory before he got all the approvals to be able to do it. So if you are interested in checking out what was going on in the Hytera factory back in, when was it, 2017? Might have been 2018, sometime like that. Have a look at that video that I dropped in the chat. Yes, I may even be in that video. I don't know. Possibly. but it was fun. That was a really fun factory tour. So I do not intend to rebuild a Hytera factory or something at that sort of level of quality. Yes, I am in that video. No, I'm not wearing the same top. Andy's in it as well. There are a few people in there that you'll probably recognize. If you have been hanging around the maker community in Melbourne at all over the last few years, you should recognize most of the people in this video. Yeah. So, what was I saying? That's right. Back to the topic of conversation. Steve, keep me on topic, please. At the moment, I'm going over and over in my head this whole thing about, do I rent some factory space? Do I come to an arrangement? There's a member of the Melbourne hackerspace, Lachlan, who has a factory that's only about 5 minutes drive from my house. Maybe 8 minutes. Depends on traffic. It's not far. It's in Bayswater, like next suburb over. And he has 2 big factories, like adjoining side by side, and they've knocked a hole through the wall, so effectively they've got one enormous space, and they're not using a whole lot of it. So there's a possibility. I went down last Monday and went and visited Lachlan's factory space and checked out what he was doing. He's doing some really cool stuff. I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to talk about in terms of what he does. I'm pretty sure it's okay. Like, he doesn't mind it being disclosed, but I'll err on the safe side. So he does, he builds some very interesting equipment in there, and they've been building gear in there for production lines, for food production lines, for, I don't know, like 40 years or something. And they're just not using all the space that they have. So one possibility that I've been talking to Lachlan about is him carving off part of the space in one of his factories, and I could use that to set up a production line and all that sort of thing. All right. Mako said, would I like to be in the YouTuber stream? I don't know, maybe. Yeah, Arsean says, Mako, no, Big Clive will have no idea who I am. No, he'd have no idea who I am either. So Stephen W said sublease. Yeah, something like that. So we don't, at the moment, it's a preliminary conversation that has all come about because just over the last couple of weeks, I've been making these arrangements to get these pick and place machines. And of course, the next question is, pick up the pick and place machines. Where do I put them? And yeah. All right. Sion says, I keep saying we should meet halfway and set up a space for both of us. Yes. Yeah, that would put us halfway. That would put us where? Somewhere around Blackburn or Box Hill or somewhere in that ballpark, give or take, which is kind of where rent is not cheap, unfortunately. Yes. It's tricky. Finding somewhere is tricky. Yeah, and as part of talking to Lachlan about his space, one of the things was trying to figure out what's the current going rate for for factory space if I was going to get somewhere. So I had a quick look on Real Commercial and looked at spaces that were kind of appropriate, the 100 to 200 square meter space sort of range, just to get some idea of if I got like a 120 square meter warehouse, for example, like a little factory, how much would it cost? And therefore, what is it per square meter? Just to have some indication of if I'm going to sublease some space, what would I be paying for it? And in doing that, I came across a couple of places that actually look really good. That this is the thing, is that because of all the turmoil that we're going through at the moment, there have been there have been businesses that have closed or they've relocated. The last 18 months has been, it's been a boon for some people, and it has been a bust for others. And yeah, I know people with businesses that have just gone crazy over the last 18 months. They can't keep up. It's so busy. And there are others that have gone bust, obviously. And yeah, so we're in this big state of flux. There are properties becoming available. There are people wanting to move to bigger places because their businesses are going so well, and then the smaller places become available. So in terms of things like commercial real estate, yeah, it's all really active at the moment. And there are a couple of places that have come up that look really good. There is a place in Croydon, just off the back of Croydon Main Street, which is a bit bigger than I need. I think it's 164 or so square meters, which is more space than I need, but at least then I wouldn't have to care about space. I could use it for storage and put all sorts of stuff in there. And it is really surprisingly cheap. Yeah. So when I started looking around, so I talked to Lachlan first and went and checked out his factory, and then thought, what is the current going rate for commercial space? And I looked it up, and it is less than I thought. So I am I think it is quite likely that sometime in the next little bit, I will be moving stuff out of here and maybe into some commercial space, which will have, if I do end up going that way, it'll have some knock-on benefits. One is that our house would become so much more livable. At the moment, it is absolutely jam-packed. We have no storage available. Every spare bit of space, like stacked inside the ceiling space. I've put chipboard up inside the ceiling, and then piled stuff up in the rafters. The ceiling of the place is just loaded with boxes and plastic containers of storage of things. Like there are computers and all sorts of stuff. And my garage, you have to sort of walk a narrow path to get around all of the stacked boxes, and I've got racks full of stuff out there. So one of the results of all of this is that we haven't been able to get the car in our garage for years. And we've got, the classic thing of, you've got a ladder, where do you put it? We don't have anywhere to put a ladder. Like, there is no space to put a ladder in storage somewhere. So the normal sorts of household storage things where you would just go, stick it in the garage. There is no space in the garage. And that then puts flow-on pressure on the rest of the house, and it makes it hard to keep the house organized as well, because there just isn't that breathing space to deal with things. Yeah. Oh, Matt says, lol, Croydon, find that hilarious. Yes. Croydon, Melbourne, Victoria, not Croydon, England. There are so many places around here that, okay, I'm just going to try to think of a few more. You have a Bayswater, I assume. You'd have to have a Bayswater. But yeah, there are so many suburb names and town names and things around Australia that are just transplanted directly out of the UK. When I say UK, I should say England, technically. Yep, Bayswater, London, that's right. Oh, and Ryan says Melbourne, Florida. Yes. Yeah, so, and in the centre of Melbourne here, so Melbourne is designed, the core of Melbourne is designed as a grid. It was all planned. It didn't develop organically like Sydney did. Right from the early days, there was a plan for how Melbourne was going to be built. And so the streets are in a grid, and if you go, what is it, from west to east, the north running streets are King, what is it? King George, Queen Elizabeth. As in King Street, George Street, Queen Street, Elizabeth Street. Did I get that right? I don't know. I go into the city so infrequently that I don't even know the names of the major streets in our CBD. Peter says a bunch of drunken Tasmanians created Melbourne. Yeah. Alec says I was brought up in Maidstone, but the one in the UK. Yeah, there's a Maidstone in Queensland, isn't there? Queensland, the suburb. I'm in Victoria, the suburb. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, Matt says there's a Maidstone in Oz. Yes, there's a Maidstone. I think that what happened was when places were being named in Australia. Now, what I like to see is more of the traditional place names, like using, when I say traditional, I mean using the Aboriginal place names in the local dialect, which I think is a much nicer way of doing it. But I think what happened was someone got a map of England and cut it up with a pair of scissors, so it had all the place names like Croydon and Maidstone and Bayswater and that sort of thing. And they cut it up into slips of paper, and then they put it all in a hat and they sort of jumbled it around, and then they pulled out all the place names and they stuck them on a map of Australia. So what we've got in Australia are places that have a huge amount of overlap with place names in England. It's just that they're all in different places. Canterbury, yes. There's Canterbury. Canterbury is a suburb, not all that far away. Yes. Yeah. Matt says, I wonder if there's a Bognor Regis in Australia. I have no idea. I haven't heard of a Bognor Regis. What is that? Is Reno a town in the UK too? Queen's Avenue and King Street here in East and West End. Yeah. Yeah. Dodgy says, so Queensland is so good they named it after the Queen. Okay. There is. Oh, there's some funny ones. Iggy. So Iggy's just saying goodbye? Okay, well, I suppose it is almost time to say goodbye anyway. Stephen says, did you look at cost to purchase space versus leasing costs? All right, now this is really interesting. The cost to purchase is really, really high compared to leasing, from what I've seen. And the other thing is, I wouldn't be able to get a loan, is the short thing. So many of you will know this already. The very brief recap is that I came out of IVT broke. All right, I'll give you some numbers. This falls into the, I'm probably breaching an NDA by disclosing this, but what the hell, sue me. So IVT was my software company. Ended up selling for, and the thing is that it was such a stressful period, such a terrible situation that my memory of it is kind of blocked out. Anyway, we sold the company for a number that was significantly above $1 million, a little bit short of 2 million. Like, that gives you some ballpark number at least. I haven't totally broken the NDA by revealing that. So we sold the company for close-ish to $2 million. But the company at the time had huge debt, and because at the time of the sale I was the sole director, it meant that ultimately the liability fell on me personally. And so once the sale was done, it was like receive a check coming in this hand, chuck it in the bank and go, oh, look how much money is in the bank. And then the next day start sending out chunks of money in like hundreds of thousands of dollars increments in order to cover all the things that needed to be covered. And once that process had been going on for a little while, I was still holding a large personal liability. And so that's the hole I've been digging myself out of for the last few years. Anyway, I won't go into that in too much more detail. But the end result is I am starting from a net negative position. I've over the last couple of years, I've been doing contracting work, which has been amazing. It's so good. And I've been getting a lot of satisfaction out of it, and I've been getting paid for it, which is great. So that has been, so yeah, the in versus out is now positive. It is going in the right direction. The balance is going up, but the situation I'm in is that there is no way that I could get a loan for anything. I couldn't get a loan to buy, I don't know, a lollipop. So I kind of have to work my way out myself by just by doing whatever I need to do to earn the money, and I can't rely on doing something like going out and getting a loan for a property and repaying it, because even though I am now in a position where I actually could service the loan, I don't have the history that shows that would give a lender confidence to do that. So what it means is that if you look at the price of buying a factory, say, let's pick a number, say a 150 square meter factory in this general area, you're looking at many hundreds of thousands of dollars. To rent a 150 square meter factory in this general area, you're looking at around 17, give or take, say around $17,000 per year as a rough rule of thumb. It's a little bit over $100 per square meter per year to rent in this area. It's like 110-ish. It varies. The places I've seen vary from like $91 per square meter per year to about $138 at the high end. So say $110 per square meter per year, give or take $17,000 a year for 150 square meter factory space, versus many hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably like $600,000, $500,000 to buy the same thing. And if you work out the period of time to pay back the loan with the interest on top of it and all of that sort of thing, it would be really hard to justify buying a factory and being tied into that sort of that commitment versus being on a lease and being able to terminate the lease and walk away. It's a very different proposition. Yeah. All right. Gerald said, to get a loan, you have to prove that you don't need it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. As Sion said, so Stephen Pam asked, why in broad terms was OVT in a lot of debt when you exited? Yeah, I have talked about this in the past. I might talk about it more in the future. The very brief summary is that there was fraud involved. Well, not by me, luckily. There was fraud, and there was a failed attempt to sell the company, which incurred a whole lot of debt, because we actually had an arrangement to sell the company, and the person that bought it didn't have the money that they said they did. Contract was signed, it was all done. They actually took over operation of the business, and then it turned out that they had been lying, and our due diligence had not picked it up. The funds that they claimed to have available were not available, and it ended up at the point where we had to actually repossess the business. Which sounds weird, but it's like selling a car and someone says, yep, the money will be in your account tomorrow, and they take the car away, and then the money is not in your account. You've got to get the car back. And yeah, in this case, we had to get the business back, like to the extent of lawyers and locksmiths changing the locks. We literally repossessed our own company to get it back from the buyer. And that cost, how much did we lose? I can't remember. I think we would have lost close to $1 million in like expenses and things that we incurred as a result of that happening compared to if it hadn't happened. So there are a whole lot of things. But people need to down pay, yes, and there were down payments. So this is a whole rabbit hole that I could go on for a long time. There were down payments, and it turned out that there were dodgy things happening with the down payments that were raised against debt that then had to be called in, and then okay. Right now, so for context, IVT, the company that I had and sold, over the space of a couple of decades, grew to a company where we had 42 staff and we were turning over millions of dollars a year, like just revenue, and we had money in the bank. Like we had hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash just sitting in the bank. It was in a really good shape. It was in good shape and doing pretty well. And then the process of exiting out of it, everything exploded. All these things went bad. Yeah, we discovered fraud, and yeah. I don't want to relive this too much. But the end result was that in trying to escape, I escaped. I had a nervous breakdown as part of the process. Got to the point where I lost the ability to speak. All right, let's not go there. All right. Yeah. So, on this cheery note, what else can we talk about? It is actually kind of time to wrap up. There was something else I was going to talk about today. Now, we've done the Cisco thing. Just to wrap that up again, if anyone is interested in those Cisco bits and pieces, then email me, jon@oxa.com.au. I will put you in touch with my friend Jeffrey, who has those routers and Ethernet switches and that access controller or whatever that thing was. I don't even know. And yeah, you can do a deal with him, go and pick them up. Now, the second thing I was going to talk about was the vacuum. I'm doing a mental recap here of like our to-do list, the to-do list for the live stream. We've got the vacuum table, and that seems to be working. So I'm going to, next stage for that is, come on, change cameras, that's it. So next stage for that is I'm going to try mounting this on my stencil printed jig and yeah, tape this down and do some actual tests with it, run some real solder paste through it. But this seems to be working, which is so cool. Nice one, Sion. Sion, if you feel like dropping a chip, you can lend me the money for a big lollipop. Thank you. So if yeah, I'm going to keep experimenting with the vacuum table thing. It is a cool project. Definitely go and have a look at Sion's videos about that. In fact, I'm going to find his videos right now and unexpected maker. I can't type. Yeah, unexpected maker. Sorry, you're just watching me clicking around YouTube. Okay, how about this? I'm just going to drop Sion's channel. I'm not even going to link to a specific video. So his vacuum table videos are in there somewhere. And I'll drop a couple of other things in here. So this one, which I dropped in before, is the link to the Hytera factory tour. I'm going to watch that again after I finish this live stream because I want to remind myself of what that place was like. And I'll see how much of it is actually represented on the video, because as I said, there was a lot that they just did not want to reveal. We could see it in person. We weren't allowed to take away records of it or video or anything. So what else? Oh, that's right. We talked about pick and place machines. So I'm going to get a couple of KO A4s, which is going to be awesome. And that's about it, I think. What I should do is go inside the house and find out what's going on in there. Because, yeah, as I said, it's my daughter's 21st this weekend, so there are a whole bunch of people in the house. I'll go in and see if they need anything. So Sion said I also did some streams about it on my second channel. Cool, thanks for adding that one. Yep. Alrighty. I think it's time to wrap up. Just about. It is time. Just tipped over the 2 hours. And I could talk about more. There is so much more to talk about. There is always more to talk about. But it's getting late for you, for some. Mako, yes, no worries. And Peter's saying, you still here? Yes, I am still here. But I will go now, Peter. I've got to come and visit you in Tasmania. Now that borders are starting to open. Now, Tasmania, as I understand it, is in a good place right now, keeping themselves a little bit isolated from the rest of Australia. I will, when the time comes, I will come and visit you, Peter. And we have got to go out to, there was that cafe you mentioned on Twitter a week or two ago. Anyway, it'll be good to see you again. All right. Now, I really do have to go, I think. Where am I? All right. I click that, then I click that, and then I click that. I've got to automate this. I've got to do that big red button to end the live stream, so I don't have to click all these buttons. But anyway, thanks for coming along. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you really soon. Bye.